Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. In a moment, we're going to bring you an episode of Mathew Slade, Private Investigator. And after we play the episodes, we'll start to unravel some of the mysteries behind this odd and rare radio detective series. But before we get started, I do want to encourage you, if you enjoy the podcast, to follow us using your favorite podcast software. I also want to encourage you to check out our other podcasts. Today, I'm highlighting Public Domain Video Theater, which is the video companion to this podcast. We've released our first episode of the new year, which is the final Bulldog Drummond film, and we'll also be playing episodes of Dragnet, which we didn't feature on our first run through the series. And you can check that out at videotheater.greatdetectives.net and on our YouTube channel. September 30th, 1962 is the date that is traditionally listed as the end of the golden age of radio. And what it ultimately meant was that network radio was no longer airing the dramas and comedy that had dominated the airwaves for so much of the era from the 1930s into the very early part of the 1960s. It certainly didn't mean that radio drama had died. There is not a week since 1962 that there hasn't been a new radio drama broadcast. In the past year on The Amazing World of Radio, we've featured an episode of Theater 5 from 1965, and an episode of the Salvation Army series Heartbeat Theater from 1966. But for our purposes on the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio, there's not a whole lot of detective programming, and there weren't a whole lot of new detective series. In fact, there was only one. Mathew Slade, Private Investigator, which was actually spelled with one T rather than two, was originally aired over the Pacifica Network in 1964 and then resyndicated. The series was the only American radio detective series released between the end of Johnny Dollar in 1962 and the premiere of Jim French's first detective series, Dameron, nearly 10 years to the day after Johnny Dollar left the air. Now, there are a whole lot of really interesting facts about Mathew Slade that I want to go ahead and share with you, but I want to also get into the episode, so we're going to talk more about all of that after today's adventure. So here, from August the 2nd, 1964, is the Mathew Slade episode, The Bachelor's Club.
From Hollywood, welcome to Starlight Mystery Theater and another episode in the series Mathew Slade, Private Investigator. We invite you to take your seat as Mathew Slade unfolds the story of the Bachelor's Club.
In my job, the hours are odd. So are the circumstances and the people I meet. You could even call some of them dangerous. My calling card reads, Mathew Slade, Private Investigator. The early morning San Francisco sun flooded my office. A new day and a new week was beginning, and with it, perhaps the start of a new case.
Here's the mail, boss.
Yeah. Anything of interest?
An invitation.
You've
made the grade.
What?
You've been invited to become a member of the Bachelor's Club. It's a real status symbol.
Oh, well, I know something about status symbols, Jonesy, but I'm afraid this Bachelor's Club thing escapes me.
Matt, it's one of the most exclusive men's clubs in town. In order to get in, you have to be extremely successful, good-looking, and single. but definitely single.
Mm-hmm.
See their mottos on the top of the letterhead. Look. Society for the Preservation of the Single Male American.
Hear, hear.
They're in conflict with marriage, but not with women. You see, they meet for lunch twice a week, and at each luncheon they invite a girl. An invitation to join the Bachelors for lunch is as coveted in this town as the Pulitzers.
Oh, really? And just as hard to get, I'll bet.
They screen every girl thoroughly before she's invited, and they get the pick of the litter. And she doesn't have a free weekend for the next 12 weeks. They must have had a casualty.
Casualty?
Yeah, well, usually the only time there's an opening in the membership is when one of the unalterable ones goes to the altar.
Oh.
They keep the membership at an even dozen.
Why is that?
Oh, I guess they think it's a nice, round figure.
Mm-hmm. I guess they know all about nice, round figures, huh?
Well, shall I RSVP for you, Matt?
No, I don't think so, Jonesy. I think I'll pass on this one.
Oh, Matt, you can't refuse. This may be my only chance.
So that's it, is it?
Oh, I wasn't fooling you a bit. No Bachelor's Club.
I'm afraid not. Not this season, sweetheart. So you can just unbook your next 12 weekends.
Mathew Slade. Your name, please. The mountain came to Mohammed.
What? Who is it?
One moment, please. It's David Brandt.
Who?
David Brandt, you know, the Bachelor's Club.
Oh, yeah. Hello.
My name is David Brandt, Mr. Slade. I'm with Brandt Textile. I also happen to be the president of the Bachelor's Club here in town.
Yes, I know, Mr. Brandt. I received your invitation this morning.
I hope you'll forgive my calling so soon, but after mailing the invitation, I decided a phone call would be more appropriate.
Oh, not at all. I'd like to thank you for asking me to join your group, but I don't think I'm your 12th man.
No matter, Mr. Slade. I've convinced the membership you'd make an excellent addition to our brotherhood. You see, I have an ulterior motive for asking you. It's not purely social.
Well, am I to understand you want to hire me professionally, that joining this club is merely a device?
Yes, that's correct. Our luncheon is tomorrow. May I stop by your office for you about noon? We can talk things over then.
Well, I'd like to know more about what it is you want me to do.
I have to go now, Mr. Slade. Let's discuss it tomorrow. If you choose not to accept, it will have only cost you your lunch hour. Is it agreed, then?
All right. See you tomorrow at noon.
How do you do, Mr. Slade?
David Brandt.
Yes. The Blue Fox, driver. Oh, forgive me, Mr. Slade, but I neglected to ask you. You aren't married, are you?
I was born and raised a bachelor.
Good. I mean, if there were a Mrs. Slade, I wouldn't have wanted it to get out of the club, you understand?
Well, what's on your mind, Mr. Brandt?
I'll begin by asking you if you're familiar with a murder case involving a beautiful young model named Clover Shannon.
Yes, I am. She was murdered about a month ago. The police have no clues, or so they say.
Well, I've been trying to remedy that. The law's hard to convince. Clover attended one of our luncheons 2 months before she was murdered. Most of us dated her. We were all questioned by the police and cleared. They couldn't make any connection between her death and the club.
But you can?
I know who killed her. It was a man called Paul Emerson.
Well, who is this Paul Emerson?
His father has controlling interest in the Emerson Deerfield Chemical Company. Paul's vice president. You'll meet him at lunch.
Well, what proof do you have he did it?
None right now. That's where you come in, Mr. Slade.
You must have a reason for suspecting.
I have. The police don't think it's very good, but I do.
Well, it's a place to start. What is it?
Paul is one of the few in the club who never dated Clover. Well, he wanted to, all right, but she didn't like him. At all. The kind of guy who can't stand being rejected, particularly by a woman. Clover avoided Paul like the plague. She wouldn't even talk to him. One afternoon at one of our luncheons, I overheard Paul telling Greg Fielding about an oil painting of Clover, one she had hanging in her apartment over her fireplace.
Greg Fielding.
Of Fielding Advertising, the youngest brother.
Oh, yes, yes. Well, go on, about the painting.
Well, Paul described it to Greg in such a vivid way. It made me feel he'd actually seen it.
Well, isn't it possible he did?
No, Mr. Slade. Paul was never in Clover's apartment. Not invited, anyway.
Well, what you're saying, then, is that Emerson saw Clover's painting when he went to her apartment to kill her.
That's my theory.
Couldn't someone have told Emerson about the painting, just as he told Fielding?
In order to describe it the way he did, with such feeling and insight, he would have had to have seen it, sir. Not only seen it, but to have studied it long and carefully. I know what I'm talking about, Mr. Slade. Now, will you accept?
Well, the question is, will you? My fee is $200 a day plus expenses.
You're hired, Mr. Slade.
That was an excellent lunch, Mr. Brandt.
Yes, how about a nice cigar to top things off?
Thanks.
Here's a light. Oh, it's you.
Thank you.
This is Paul Emerson.
Matt Slade, Mr. Emerson.
Please call me Paul. You're one of us now. No formalities here, right, David?
Certainly, Paul. First names only.
Mind if I join you?
If you must.
Well, Matt, what do you think of our little group?
Impressed. I only hope they like me.
I'd say from their reactions, you get an A1 rating. Besides, David gave you such a big build-up, he had us all brainwashed. As usual.
Yes. As you can see, Mr. Slade, Paul regards me as some sort of a dictator.
Oh, not really, David. You may be a little autocratic and a bit of a despot, but never a dictator.
Excuse me, Matt. I'm going in to join the others at the bar. Stay and talk with Paul. Maybe some of your tranquility will rub off on him. Join us when you've had your fill of Mr. Belligerence.
There goes the noblest bachelor of them all.
I get the distinct impression that you two are playing Cain and Abel. Why?
No, it's just a show we put on for the new boys. Deep down in our hearts, we really hate each other.
Well, then why do you stay in the club?
It's a matter of pride. Or maybe just stubbornness. Call it what you will. Neither one of us is ready to retreat. I'd say it's a battle to the death.
Figuratively speaking.
Naturally. Whatever else I am, I'm not violent. But take David now. I'm not too sure about him. He's got a cold cunning that would make Satan shiver.
How do the others feel about him?
Well, he's got them all mystified. He keeps the women flowing. They think he's great.
Mm-hmm. And you, how do the women feel about you?
Do you expect me to be objective about that?
Why not? You know the truth when you see it, don't you?
Oh, yes, I guess so. I rubbed some of them the wrong way. I'm an individualist. So, you ask a lot of questions.
Oh, that's my inquisitive nature showing again.
What is your profession? David never did say.
Yeah, that's right. I guess he forgot. I'm an investigator and artifacts investigator. I locate antiques and art treasures for museums and private collectors.
You're an archaeologist?
No, not exactly. I'm in it for the money.
Ah, materialist, my favorite religion.
Name one thing more interesting than money.
Women.
Ah, touche. My error and my favorite subject. Tell me, what kind of women do we meet at our little gatherings?
The cream of the crop, Matt. The choicest tidbits in town. Of course, once in a while we come up with a loser.
What do you mean, a loser?
Oh, they're all lookers. I don't mean that. It's the attitude. Some of them get picky. That's the toughest thing to screen. The attitude. You can never be sure just what it's going to be.
Well, everyone has likes and dislikes. That sounds perfectly normal.
Well, that may be true. Anyway, the woman hasn't been born who can humiliate me.
If you're not her type, what can you do about it?
Oh, plenty.
Like what, Paul?
Well, you can drop her, you can... I don't know. Look, why worry about it? It's never happened.
I thought you said some of the girls weren't always cooperative.
Well, some of the other guys have had trouble that way. I didn't say I did. When I want something, I usually get it.
With persistence?
How well?
I don't know. You tell me. Emerson made an interesting suspect. I wanted to find out more about Clover Shannon's murder, so I paid a visit to my friend Sergeant Sid Dinelli of Homicide.
Shannon. Oh, here it is.
That's kind of a skimpy file, isn't it, Sid?
Well, that's all we know about this one. The case is loaded with blind alleys. Lieutenant Flagg is practically ripped out what little air he has left. And I'm about ready for the mumbles after what we've been able to come up with. What's your angle?
Mr. David Brandt from the Bachelor's Club.
Oh, I know. He claims Paul Emerson did it. Yeah, we checked it out. It's one of the blind alleys you'll find in this report.
I had a long talk with Emerson, Sid. I think he's got possibilities. Oh, by the way, you can congratulate me. I'm a bachelor at large. Or undercover, perhaps, would be more appropriate.
Well, if you can string this out a while, the fringe benefits might prove interesting.
You mean?
I mean, I know all about their native customs.
Oh, not me, friend Sergeant. I'm the epitome of unswerving diligence to duty.
Until a friendly skirt flutters by. You forget, Slade, I know you.
Well, we all have our weaknesses, Sergeant. Now, back to business. What can you tell me about Clover Shannon's murder?
Well, it's all here in the file. We found her strangled in the shower. Her skin a beet red from the hot water being turned on her.
Any theories why the killer did that?
Yeah. Sadism. Can you think of a better one?
Nothing in the apartment to lead you anywhere?
Not a thing. Not a fingerprint or anything resembling a murder implement.
The killer used something other than his bare hand?
Yeah, the coroner thought so, but couldn't pinpoint just what it was from the markings on her throat.
I see. Anything else?
We checked out all her friends, business associates, your fellow playmates in the Bachelor Club. All dead ends.
Sid, could I see her apartment?
Sure, it's still vacant. All her things are still there. We thought maybe...
Oh, no, not that old routine about the killer returning to the scene of the crime.
We're keeping the place watched. Nothing's turned up. Look, Matt, if you were as desperate as we are, you'd try anything, too.
Oh, come on, I was only ribbing, Sid.
Yeah, here's the key. I'll let the boys know you're coming over. Just make sure of two things.
What's that?
You bring the key back, and if you find out anything, you bring that back, too. Deal?
Deal. I let myself into Clover Shannon's apartment. First glance, it appeared that nothing had been touched. I began a systematic search for what I didn't know. Maybe I thought whatever it was I hoped to find would jump up and hit me in the face. I started with the bathroom where her body was found, then I moved to the bedroom, kitchen, finally into the living room. I found nothing. I realized it was a waste of time. The police had covered everything with a fine-tooth comb. I started to leave, but then I noticed it, or more correctly, I noticed the absence of it. The oil painting David Brandt had mentioned. It was gone. All that remained above the fireplace was a light, square ring of dust where the picture had hung. On my way over to the offices of Brandt Textiles on the Embarcadero, I called Sid Dinelli from my car phone and told him what I had discovered. Whoever took the painting had to slip by Sid's stakeout. A neat trick. I had an idea who that might be. But first, I wanted another talk with David Brandt. What brings you here? I think I've got a lead. Is there anything more you can tell me about Paul Emerson's conversation with Fielding concerning the oil painting of Clover Shannon?
No more than I've already told you. Only to reiterate that the way he talked about it in such detail, I'm sure he must have had a good long look at it.
When did this conversation take place? Before or after Clover's murder?
Why, after. Within the past week.
I just came from her apartment, David. The painting is gone.
Paul must have taken it.
Yeah, well, that's my guess.
He's sick, isn't he? That thing in the shower, and now this. Risking the chance of getting caught by a police stakeout just to have her picture.
Yes, it was risky.
Have you told the police?
About the painting being gone? Yes, but not about Paul.
Well, why not? They can arrest him.
If they find the painting in his possession, they'll arrest him as a suspect, but it won't be conclusive proof that he also killed her. Now, I think I can find out something more. Say, I don't suppose you could arrange for my secretary to be the guest at our next luncheon.
That's tomorrow. Well, of course I can arrange it.
Oh, that's fine.
Oh, but how does she figure into this?
Oh, I didn't mean to mislead you. Jonesy, that's my secretary, made me promise that I'd get her one of your coveted invitations.
Oh.
As a matter of fact, David, I'm sure that you'd like her very much.
Oh?
And I'm positive that she would find you extremely interesting.
What's she like?
Very attractive. A lot of fun. And easy to get to know.
Well, haven't you staked a claim, so to speak?
I go along with that theory of not mixing business with pleasure.
Well, thanks for the lead. But if you don't mind my changing the subject, you still haven't told me what you're going to do about Paul.
Well, I'd rather not say just now. The truth is, I'm not exactly sure. But I will come up with something. Oh, by the way, this business of yours is rather interesting. I noticed those products showcased in your receptionist's office. What are they?
They're beautiful. The samples of the new fiber we've been experimenting with. See, we're trying to develop a fiber that will combine the thinness and flexibility of thread with the tensile strength of a steel chain.
Is that so? For what purpose?
Use in the space program. Other functions.
Well, how's it coming?
We're very near the solution.
Well, I hope it won't be much longer before I can say the same. So long, David. I returned to my office. Jonesy took the news of her invitation to the Bachelor's Club with all the grace and dignity of a Beatle fan.
Matt, really? You're not kidding?
No, I'm not kidding.
Oh, I can't believe it.
You've been invited for lunch tomorrow. I arranged it, but for a purpose. Not just to be a good-hearted joke.
And what's this purpose?
Jonesy, I want you to do me a favor. Now, you've always been telling me about how much you want to take a more active part in my investigations. Well, sugar, the time has come. You willing?
Of course. What do you want me to do?
One of the members of the Bachelor's Club is Paul Emerson. I want you to play up to him tomorrow. Get him to ask you for a date for tomorrow night. Now, whatever you do, don't make it obvious. Just enough to let him know you're interested. Under no circumstances do I want you accepting a date with David Brandt. I want you to snub him deliberately so he'll know it and without any doubt. I think it's best you don't know the complete story. Just play your little role the way I told you, and you leave the rest to me. The stage was set. I drove Jonesy to the restaurant, parked her with the maitre d', and went into the private room where the luncheon was being held. The procedure for introducing the female guest of honor was a semi-elaborate one. After the 12 of us had taken our seats, the maitre d' entered with Jonesy on his arm. David got up and escorted Jonesy to a chair at his left. Being the newest member, I was relegated to a seat near the foot of the table. Emerson was seated to Jonesy's left. David made the introduction.
It is my extreme pleasure to present our charming guest of honor, Miss Rowena Jones.
Jonesy flashed a bright smile and gave a nod of her head to all of us at the table. Then Brandt proceeded to introduce each of us. I kept a close eye on my three leading players at the far end of the table. Jonesy was doing an excellent job. Every time Brandt attempted to talk to her, she turned her attention to Emerson. Brandt was obviously annoyed, began to stare in my direction. I merely shrugged my shoulders and gave back a puzzled expression. After lunch, the baker's dozen broke into two groups. Jonesy, surrounded by 10 panting bachelors, and myself, surrounded by an embittered David Brandt.
She's obviously a snob. I thought I could depend on you for something better.
Her behavior surprised me as much as it did you. Although she did seem rather intrigued by Paul.
Who of all people, Slade, should realize he's poison for her. For any woman.
Well, I don't know about that, David. I've got some news about Paul. The police searched his apartment, his offices, and his boat.
And they found the painting, eh?
No, that's just it. They didn't. You know, I'm beginning to think your suspicions about Paul are groundless.
That's ridiculous. He must have it. He has to have it.
Well, the police say no. You've apparently made a mistake.
But that can't be.
Oh, now, why so dogmatic, David?
Well, now, who else would have taken it? Think, man. After what I've told you? Now, it must be Emerson. He's obviously tricked you in the police. Believe me, Slade, he's guilty. He's guilty of sin.
I don't know when I've had a nicer evening, Paul.
You mean it's over?
I'm afraid so.
Aren't you going to invite me in?
No.
I brought you home so early so we could relax. Here.
I intend to relax. But, alone. Good night, Paul.
But, baby.
Please don't, Paul. Look, you've been charming all evening. Don't spoil it now. Good night.
Okay, Goddess. Tonight's you're around. How about a return match tomorrow night?
Call me.
You can expect it.
Emerson, wait. It's Slade.
Matt, what's the rush?
Have you been inside with Jonesy?
Oh, no, I left her at the door.
Oh, let's hope we're not too late. Come on, quick, follow me. Jonesy, it's Matt. Open up.
Come on, Paul. Help me with this door. Jonesy!
Help me!
She's in the bathroom. Come on, through here. Let her go, Bright.
You stay away from me or I'll kill her.
Rush him.
Stay away from me.
She's scalded. You all right, Jonesy?
I think so.
I'll call the police. I'll tell them we've got Clover Shannon's murderer. Well, Angel, you still as eager to be more than just a secretary?
You can count me as a dropout from the Mathew Slade School of Acting.
I didn't plan on it being quite that close.
You're forgiven. Well, what made you suspect David Brandt?
Something he said. When I told him I found Clover Shannon's painting missing, he indicated that getting it out of the apartment was taking a big risk because of the police stakeout. Oh, he had no way of knowing the police were watching her apartment. The police don't broadcast the fact when they have a stakeout. Brandt took the painting and planted it in Emerson's apartment. Then there was something else. The murder weapon used on Clover. When I saw the fiber in Brandt's office, he told me of its strength. It occurred to me what a perfect garroting device it would make.
I can vouch for that, Matt. I still can't understand what makes a man like David Brandt want to kill.
It wasn't a question of wanting to kill Jonesy. With David, it was an uncontrollable urge. He had to cover up a wrong and then keep covering it up. He had me building a pretty good case against Emerson. I had to make him crack and force him into a wrong move. Without your help, Angel, I might not have been able to do it. And saying thank you seems like only a thimbleful of gratitude.
I know a way you can really thank me. Next time I ask to play Miss Private Eye, chain me to my typewriter.
This is the United States Armed Forces Radio and Television Service.
Welcome back. Instead of Jonesy not getting involved in PI work, I have an alternative. Hear me out, Matt. You could try letting her in on what she was getting into so that she could actually be prepared for it rather than blindsided. This is one of those mysteries that has a decent twist, but is somewhat hampered by the lack of suspects. We only meet 2 members of the Bachelor's Club, so it's kind of a simple process of elimination if you don't go for the guy who's put forth as the likely suspect. I do think that the other member's view of the killer gave a good clue. While a member had some bad attitudes, the president of the club had the sort of issues where he couldn't stand anyone not accepting him or going along with him, which was an early clue if you were looking for it. Now we're going to talk more about Mathew Slade's origins and unravel some of the confusion around this series that's out there. The first thing to know is that there was a Mathew Slade radio series that aired in Canada between 1957 and 1960. Brian Adams, an Australian who lived in Canada, ran a string of weekly newspapers, which he sold off and emigrated to the United States to further his career as a leader of a jazz band, an actor, and a talk show host. He also had ambitions of taking the character of Mathew Slade and bringing him to the screen. According to the Vancouver paper The Province in an article from January 1964, Adams had plans to make 6 Mathew Slade films and even a television series with Slade as, and I quote from the article, a James Bond-type artifacts investigator. And I guess that makes the line in this week's episode about him being an artifacts investigator, and he was making up a cover story, as a bit of a nod to that idea. Neither the movies or the TV series came to fruition, but the radio show did. It aired over the Pacifica Network, a 3-station radio network with its flagship station in Berkeley, as well as a station that had been acquired in 1959 in Los Angeles, and a third WBAI in New York City. The network had a very strong counterculture bent, and it experimented with audio drama, dabbled might be a better word, throughout the 1960s. But its offerings tended to be a bit more out there, like the Firesign Radio Theater, Compendium Cliché, or the very first Marvel radio adaptation, Doctor Strange. Mathew Slade was easily the most mainstream audio drama offering that ever aired over Pacifica, and with good reason, as there was a goal to make it a syndicated series. I know from the article in the Province that they did intend to syndicate the series in Canada, and we don't know the full extent of how widely it was syndicated. We have information on a couple of runs, which I will mention as we go along. The series aired under the name the Starlight Mystery Theater, although the only type of episode aired was Mathew Slade, Private Investigator. I don't know whether there was an intent to, if Mathew Slade was successful, to produce some other program and still be able to say, yeah, this is still the Starlight Mystery Theater. And the dating of the series has been very confusing. Even well-intended and otherwise credible sources have whiffed on it and kind of added to the confusion. Some of the confusion comes from a book that dated the series from the late 1950s, perhaps confusing it with the earlier Canadian radio series. Other confusion was introduced by researchers who focused on rebroadcasts. Several of the series episodes were rerun in 1965 on Pacifica, and then there were 2 different syndications to the Armed Forces Radio and Television Service, at least 2. The American Forces Network in Europe ran the series in 1966, and the Far East Network ran it in 1968. This often leads to some sites claiming there was an extensive run of Mathew Slade, that it ran for years. However, the best research that I can find indicates that there were only a handful of episodes, and they were recorded and broadcast in 1964 and subsequently rebroadcast. Even when it comes to dating the 1964 episodes, there can be some confusion. The series was announced as a bi-weekly offering, which is definitely different from Golden Age programs, but somewhat more common for modern detective programs over radio that don't air weekly. The first episode was The Day of the Phoenix, which was broadcast on July 9th, 1964, and then the second episode listed was The Avarice Heir, aired on July 23rd. Day of the Phoenix was adapted from a screenplay by Adams and Robert Frederick. For the AFN and FEN runs, it aired as 3 separate episodes. So Many Logs will have Day of the Phoenix Part 1 airing on July 9th, and Parts 2 and 3 airing sometime not stated in July before the 23rd. However, I was able to confirm that Day of the Phoenix, when it was first broadcast, was originally aired as a feature-length presentation in one 90-minute block. For syndication, it was broken up into 3 episodes so that there would be a 13-episode package that could be offered to other stations. But for our purposes of what aired first, you just had the whole Day of the Phoenix saga airing on July 9th. Now, for our purposes, we can't play Day of the Phoenix because only the first 2 parts are actually available, and part 2 ends on a big cliffhanger that you really need part 3 to resolve. Now, over the years, I've stumbled across various websites where people claim to possess a copy of that 3rd part, but I've not been able to obtain it, and it's not readily available. So for now, we can't play that episode, although it is very high on my list of most wanted programs. Also, the 2nd episode, The Avarice Heir, is not in circulation. The good news is that the rest of the series is. Now, this week's episode is also one that is often misdated. Many sites list it as having aired August the 8th. And this is based on a folio put out on KPFK, which announced in August 8th airing of Mathew Slade at noon. Now, I know the folks at the Pacifica Network could, as we've said, be a bit different in their approach, but you don't air a program called the Starlight Mystery Theater and premiere it on Saturday afternoon. And I was able to find a newspaper log that listed Mathew Slade as airing on August the 2nd. So my assumption would be that the program that aired on August 8th, that it was the case of a encore presentation, which radio stations do. And so that makes more sense than them airing it originally on August 8th, despite newspaper listings saying they were playing it on the 2nd. Now, I've been going on quite a while. Next week, we will go ahead and talk a bit about the cast. Now we turn to listener comments and feedback. And we start out on YouTube, where we have a comment from Ronser regarding the This Is Your FBI episode. And Ronser writes, "Great show, thank you, Adam. Happy New Year to you and yours." Thank you so much. And then on Martin Kane, Zara Voila writes, "Wow, this is a real Christmas treat. It sounds rare and extremely cool. Thank you." And R. Lavasser 5333 writes, "More Martin Kane if you can." Well, definitely keep that in mind. I definitely have a fondness for the series, and whether it's more TV band recordings of lost episodes or preferably actual old-time radio programs, I would love to feature more Martin Kane. And then we have some comments on Operation Danger from Instagram. Valencia writes, "I just listened to this earlier. I was so into it. Never heard of it before. Glad you played it." Mechanic 6682 on YouTube has a comment regarding the hero's name. Ethan Allen Rogers went on to open a furniture store and be Captain America in his spare time. Well, thank you so much. I had only thought of Ethan Allen, the Revolutionary War hero of Ticonderoga, but there's a furniture store, and I probably go by the Boise version of it 4 or 5 times a month. And it was a company. It was founded in 1932 by 2 brother-in-laws, and they purchased a bankrupt furniture factory in Vermont in 1936, and they named it Ethan Allen because they sold early American furniture. President's Day sales at Ethan Allen must be particularly interesting, as you can buy a mattress in the name of George Washington at a store named after one of the heroes of Ticonderoga. Really helps you sleep patriotically about your purchase. Mechanic 6682 also comments, "Adam, I actually listen on Audible because it has a sleep timers, which YouTube does not. I just come on YouTube to comment and hit the like button. I'm almost done through with everything on Audible, and will have to listen to earlier seasons on YouTube unless I can find earlier seasons on another podcast. I suppose you have them through your website. I really like using the sleep feature, so when I fall asleep, I know how far back to rewind. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the comment. And also appreciate you taking the time to go over to YouTube to like and comment, because that really helps us out there. Now, on Audible, as well as all other podcast stores, we actually have some really complete archive feeds. We have our Volume 1 feed, which collects seasons 1 through 3. That one's at volume1.greatdetectives.net. We have our Volume 2 feed, which collects seasons 4 through 6, volume2.greatdetectives.net. And then we also have our Volume 3 feed, which is currently posting episodes from Season 7, volume3.greatdetectives.net, and eventually we'll have Seasons 8 and 9 there as well. And we'll have more archive feeds as we finish posting episodes, but we do have those 3 volumes as of right now. Thanks so much. Appreciate all your comments. Now it is time to thank our Patreon supporter of the day. And I want to go ahead and thank Mark. Mark has been one of our Patreon supporters since March of 2020, currently supporting the podcast at the Shamus level of $4 or more per month. Thanks so much for your support, Mark. And that will actually do it for today. If you're enjoying the podcast on YouTube, be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, mark the notification bell, and leave a comment. All those great things that help YouTube channels to grow. We'll be back next Tuesday with another episode of Mathew Slade, but join us back here tomorrow for Broadway's My Beat, where...
To ask you again, Mr. Clover.
Sit down, Rhoda.
No. A beggar who stands can keep some dignity. I like to think that anyhow. Maybe it's a lie.
Rhoda.
Did you say my name gently to show me you pity me? I don't want to be pitied.
No, look, Miss Lynn, Danny was only trying
Rhoda, listen to me.
Listen. Yes, I'll listen. Say a kind word to me.
Rhoda, you've come to ask me to have your father's body exhumed. I know that.
You know that.
But we've already done that. 2 months ago, 4 months after your father died, we exhumed his body. He wasn't poisoned, Rhoda. In spite of what you say, he wasn't poisoned.
Poisoned? That's how my father died. Robert Lynn, my father, was murdered. That's a simple sentence. Understand it.
The death certificate...
My father was poisoned, and I'm being poisoned, and I'm going to die. And you'll sit there and say my dying meets all the requirements for dying because there'll be a death certificate.
I hope you'll be with us then. In the meantime, send your comments to box13@greatdetectives.net. Follow us on Twitter at Radio Detectives, and check us out on Instagram, instagram.com/greatdetectives. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.